Welcome, everyone. This is Kentucky Spin. We're presenting along with Child Care Aware, KEYS, or the Kentucky Early Intervention System, and Help Me Grow Kentucky, presenting Navigating Early Intervention and Beyond for Families. As we get started here, we're just going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Kentucky SPIN, or the Special Parent Involvement Network, has been around since 1988 when Kentucky first received a Parent Training Information Center, or PTI. U.S. Department of Education has funded Kentucky SPIN under IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Here at SPIN, we do strive to be acronym free because there are a lot of acronyms. But as we go through, you will find that anytime we do use acronyms, that we will also put them out there, and we will also try to put those in the chat as well to make sure that we are accessible for everyone. So the center that we have provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities, birth through age 26, and really beyond that, their parents, their families, and also the professionals in their lives. So what we do here at Kentucky Spin, it's really what we don't do. The thing we don't do is we are not attorneys. We are not lawyers. I went to school to become a registered nurse, so we cannot give that legal advice. But what we do is that we empower families so they can effectively advocate for their children. And we do this by providing that peer-to-peer support to help families find that access for the needed information and those resources that they need. Everyone here at Kentucky Spin either has a disability or a family member of disability. So when we say peer-to-peer, we're talking about that these are our kids. This is our family. Just a quick disclosure. This is not a training of trainers event. Kentucky Spin does not authorize other agencies or organizations or individuals to train this material. This presentation is for educational purposes only. Third-party recording and streaming is strictly prohibited, and all rights are going to be reserved for use by Kentucky Spin. I'm also going to say that everyone that you see here on screen today, some of us are working from home, some of us are in office. With that being said, we ask that everyone give us a little bit of grace. If you're somewhere in Kentucky in the middle right now, you're probably getting poured on. So if something does happen with anyone's power or anything like that, we have a lot of other people in different parts of the state that can hop on and help pick up. But as always, just give us some grace, and then make sure that as we go through this presentation, that if you need to attend to your own needs, to please do so as we go through. Next up, I'm going to have, these are our presenters today. And so I'm going to, goodness, I swear you're going to hear the thunder through the microphone. It is so loud. But if we want to have Miss Angela Casey start by introducing herself briefly.
Hi, I'm Angie Casey. I'm the point of entry manager for the KEYS program in the Bluegrass and the Lincoln Trail regions. So I cover 25 counties in Kentucky, so Lexington and 16 surrounding counties, and then Hardin County and Elizabethtown, and 7 other surrounding counties. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Sally, do you think you can come off mute for a second?
Sure. My name is Sally Dannenberg, and I work with Child Care Aware, which provides coaching to child care providers throughout the state of Kentucky. And today I'm going to talk to you about a program where we also work with Help Me Grow of Kentucky to provide screening, developmental screening, and monitoring for preschool age children.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then Rhonda, do you think you can come off and introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, the key there briefly, she knows how I can be. So I'm Rhonda with Kentucky Spin. I've been with Kentucky Spin since the beginning. And I am first and foremost a sister. 3 of my siblings have disabilities from the seen to the unseen. I'm a proud foster adoptive mom to the greatest gift of my life, and I'm OCD to the max. So we'll leave it at that. Eileen.
Thank you, Rhonda. And lastly, I am Eileen. I work for Kentucky Spin as the early childhood parent educator here. I have 4 children. All 3 of my boys are on the autism spectrum. I have 2 with ADHD. I've got 2 with cerebral palsy. Um, and I've had several children. Well, 2 of my children have gone through then First Steps, but the Kentucky Early Intervention System. And so I'm actually a parent that has been involved with this. So from here, we're going to just briefly go over our learning outcomes. By the end of this training, we're hoping that you're going to understand IDEA, that Part C to Part B, and what that switch is, knowing the differences between an IFSP and an IEP. And again, we're going to get into all these wonderful acronyms and alphabet soup. And then describe that transition process from that Kentucky Early Intervention System to the public preschool. So from here, I'm actually going to hand it over to Miss Sally to continue.
Well, thank you very much, Eileen. I just want to say thank you all for being here. I'm going to be very brief with my comments because I know the information these ladies have to present later is so important. And as a former early interventionist, I want you to hear everything you can hear about the different plans that are out there. We want, as far as I'm concerned in Child Care Aware and my Help Me Grow hat, you play such an important role in the lives of your children, but we also, as supporting childcare providers, we want you to share information with them so that they know the needs of your child and can meet those needs. And Eileen, if you don't mind going on to the next slide. Okay, this is the first program I want to talk about. This is developmental screening, and this is using the ASQ3 and ASQ SE2. The QR code in the upper right-hand corner is the way that your child care provider can access this program. And this slide is in your handout. So this program is designed so we work with childcare providers to provide the links to parents so that they can actually screen their child and look at their developmental milestones, things like that. And it's a great program. It's free, it's online. Parents, if their child care provider participates, parents can access the questionnaires 24/7, 365. So it's just a great screening tool that's free for child care providers. So if you're interested, please share this with your child care provider. The other resource I want to tell you about is the developmental monitoring. And we can go to that next slide. Okay, I'm not sure whether you've heard about Learn the Signs Act Early, but it's a program from the CDC that parents can do. They can access this directly. They have a milestone tracker app that you can go on and just track your child's development. There's booklets, and also as a part of this Learn the Signs Act Early, there's learning activities. So if your child maybe has some concerns in a particular area, you can access the learning activities within the Learn the Signs Act Early program and practice some of those skills when you need to. The main part of this that's really popular with families is the Milestone Tracker app. So if we want to move on to that slide. And right in the middle there is where you can scan as a parent and join this program. It just helps track your milestones. It sends out push notifications to remind you when it's time to schedule a doctor's appointment, things like that. So these are just a few resources that are out there to help you track your child's development. And if you do have concerns, you can share those. The ASQ screening is used by many family practice pediatricians' office throughout the state. And I know Angie and the Keys people also use those developmental screeners too. So these are great resources for you. And I wish you the best of luck in, learning about your child's development. I think it's Angie's turn now.
I just wanted to say something real quick about the Milestone Tracker app because it's so awesome. Is that I had a couple of premature children, and it does adjust for that prematurity to help you know where you're looking to go to, which is really, really nice. So just shout out.
Thanks, Eileen.
Okay. So first of all, I know Eileen briefly mentioned this earlier, but We used to be called First Steps, and so I've been in the program for over 20 years. So 20 years of calling it First Steps to switching to Kentucky's Early Intervention System, or KEYS for short. You may hear me slip up and say First Steps. So if you do, I apologize, but we are now Kentucky's Early Intervention System. And we work with children from birth to age 3 who have developmental delays or who have medical conditions that put them at risk for developmental delays. We work with these children in their natural environment, and I'll kind of get into what that means a little bit more later into the slide presentation. But we're a system of educational services for and support for families to help families understand their child's development and assist the family in addressing their child's delays. We're a partnership between child's parents, caregivers, child care providers, professionals, and others to help the child grow and learn. And we are a family-centered process that's personalized to each family. And so our services are going to look different. If you have a neighbor or a friend that is also in our program, the services they receive are going to be individualized for their family and their child. So they're going to look a little different from the services that you may receive for your family and your child. And this program is a voluntary program available to families across Kentucky. Okay, there are a few things that KEYS is not, and so we are not a medical therapy program. There are children who participate in the KEYS program that also benefit from a medical model. We have children that participate in both. So a medical model is going to be like in a clinic or a medical setting where therapists work more hands-on with the child than with the family. In the KEYS program, we work more with the family to train the family on ways that they can interact and embed strategies to help their child. The KEYS program is not a provider that works independently with the child while the parent does something else. So we're really working mostly with the parents, engaging the parents on how to implement those strategies with their children. We're not a program that addresses only the child. So we wrap around the entire family and can help assist the family with getting those needs of their child met. And we are not a program without specific goals. We lean on the families to help us set the goals that are important for your family and your child. And we also are not a team that provides services without asking for family input. Your all's input is very important to everything we do. You're the expert on your child and your family. And the storm is hitting here hard now, so sorry if you're hearing thunder back there. So why is early intervention important? So early intervention increases the family's ability to meet your child's needs, and it assists infants and toddlers to reach age-appropriate developmental levels. We know with brain development that children's brains develop at the fastest rate from birth to 3. That's when they're growing and learning the most in their lifetime. And so maximizing on that development in the first 3 years is very important for a child's success later on in life. It reduces the feelings of isolation, stress, and frustration families may experience. I've heard this from many families that I've worked with across the years, is that they've had concerns and maybe folks weren't really listening to their concerns. And so to be able to have folks to lean on and have their concerns and their priorities listened to really helps families feel less isolated. It lowers long-term educational costs. Kind of one of the goals of our program is if we intervene early enough and help children get caught up to age level, that they may not need those long-term special education services once they reach school age. And then early intervention helps children to grow up to become productive and independent individuals. Any child who has a developmental delay greater than other children their age can qualify for our program, and we determine that developmental age range by completing a standardized evaluation that's going to compare their skills to skills of other children their age. Other children can qualify for our program if they have what we call an established risk condition, which is a medical condition that may result in a developmental delay. Usually those medical conditions are going to be like neurological or genetic conditions. So it's going to be a condition that has long-term lifetime concerns for their child. Okay. I mentioned in the very first slide that we provide services in the child's natural environment. Natural environment can include where the child spends the majority of their home or their life. So in their home, childcare, community settings, we provide services at playgrounds, libraries. I've even had a few providers provide early intervention sessions in Walmart with a family before, when one of the family's goals was to have a successful trip to the grocery store. So just anywhere that the child and the family participate is considered a natural environment. Children learn best from familiar people and familiar settings, and research has told us that. So, and then a team, including the parent, service coordinator, child care provider, and KEYS provider is called an individualized family service plan. IFSP for short, and that team is actually who determines what services a child and family will receive and how often they occur. So what is your role as a parent or caregiver in our program? So like I said, families, parents, guardians, you guys are the experts on this child. You know what they like, what they don't like. You have your own set of priorities that may look different than what our priorities may look like. We need that information from you guys, and to bring any questions that you have for your providers as well. We need you guys to help us set goals based on how your child's progress fits with what's important to your family. We want the child to be successful in their family's everyday routines. We want you to be active in services, to share and learn from what providers, so that you can work with your child during everyday activities in between the visits. Because if we're coming once a week, if you have a speech therapist working with your child once a week, and you have those strategies that you can work on several times every single day, your child's going to progress so much quicker if you're active in those sessions. And we need you to inform your service coordinator of any issues that may affect your family services. So if you're going on vacation, or you're moving, or maybe a service provider isn't the right fit for your family and you want to try a different provider, you can reach out to your service coordinator and they can kind of help navigate that to make that system look better for you. A lot of people want to know, well, what's the cost? There are certain things in our program that are no cost to every single family. And those are things that are provided to families at no cost by law. So every child can receive a screening, service coordination, evaluation and assessment, developing an individualized family service plan, and implementing your family rights, your procedural safeguards. So those are free services to every single family that is referred to our program. All children that are eligible, the families are assessed for their ability to pay for early intervention services and given options that are available for you to pay for those services. So there's really 3 ways that services can be paid for. One is a family participation fee based on income and family size. We also can bill Medicaid and private insurance. And so your service coordinator would go over all 3 of those options with you and discuss the pros and cons, so that you could select the best option for your family. Okay, anybody that has a concern about a child's development can make a referral by contacting the point of entry in their area. There are 15 points of entry across the state. I'm the point of entry manager, like I said, for 2 of those, for the Bluegrass area and the Lincoln Trail area, but there are There are 15 districts across the state. So there is a point of entry listing that I think is linked in some of your resources at the end of the presentation so that you should be able to access to see what county you live in and what district that you and your family fall in. Okay. And we can move on. And I'm turning this over to Eileen, I think.
Yes, just for a minute. So the Independent Family Service Plan meeting. Before you have this meeting, this is going to be a meeting that you want to prepare for in the way that you're going to talk about all the things that your child isn't able to do yet. And that's what's going to help make your goals. So for you to recognize and prior to having the meeting, look at the evaluations that they have done. Look at what some of the things that your child can and cannot do. Looking at things like your milestone tracker app and seeing some of those things so that way you can bring up the concerns that you have at that meeting and be able to participate with your service coordinator provider. During that meeting, being really positive because we're going to be discussing, my child can't have a successful trip to Walmart yet, or that my child isn't able to do something yet. And to show how is that affecting your entire family? How is it that when my child is unable to put on their shoes, that it's causing the entire family to be late for something? Because when they're making these goals, they're making them for what your family needs. And saw Angie hop back on real quick. I don't know if she wanted to pop on.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know if you hopped back on because you had something to say.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Just like seeing your beautiful face. So during the actual meeting itself, you want to make sure that you do speak up. You let those concerns that you have be known because this is a plan that is made with you. And it's about how can we, like everyone, support so that child has the best outcomes. We want this child to hit the milestones, to make that next goal, to make your family be able to function as best that it can. Ask those questions. Ask those clarifying questions. Ask them to spell everything out like you're 5 years old, especially when we start getting into some of these areas like IFSP, IEP. There's a lot of acronyms. Asking people to stop, slow down, and explain it is something you absolutely can do to make sure that you understand, as the caregiver, as the parent, what is being done to try and help your child. Share what works for you and your child. Focus on the strengths. My kid absolutely tears up some Paw Patrol. So you know what? Speech therapy, we're going to be talking about Marshall a lot because that's what my kid likes. You know that information, and that's going to really help create the service plan to make those goals for your child to try and achieve. The conference summary report is going to say everything of what's happened at that meeting. So when you're done with those meetings and afterwards, you'll receive a lot of paperwork. But in that paperwork, it should say, yep, we discussed all your concerns. These are the areas that we're going to focus on. And these are the goals of what we're trying to do and how we're going to get to them. You'll have to sign consent at that meeting for any of those services of things that you choose to do or choose not to do, because you do not have to accept services unless that's something that works for you and your family. After the IFSP meeting, they will present it to you within 5 business days. Look it over, make sure it looks right, make sure that we spelled everything correctly, because this is the plan that everybody is going to be working off of to give you services. So we want to make sure that information is good. You want to stay in touch and keep an open line of communication with your service coordinator, with your child's providers that are giving the services. Make sure that you are using those open lines of communication to let them know when things are working and when things maybe aren't working as great. You make sure you keep on top that you should be receiving progress reports. How is your child doing? Are they making progress towards the goals that you have created? And then, of course, if you do have concerns, you can request to have a meeting with your service coordinator or to either add services or try and change or take off services at any time, because you are a member of this team and we want to make sure that you are able to have your needs known when they are needed. And then From here, I think I hand it back to Angie.
Me again. After we have the IFSP meeting, that's when the services start, right? So we start, if the team determines that we're going to provide speech therapy or physical therapy or whatever professional is needed to help you and your family meet those goals, the IFSP kind of wraps all that up for us and puts it in a little bow so we all know what we're working on. Sometimes during those IFSP meetings, we have what is called a transition conference. If your child is close to the age of 3, on their 3rd birthday, they will transition out of our programs because our program only goes from birth to age 3. So we want to hold what's called a transition conference so that we can line everything up. We don't want to just end services on your child's 3rd birthday and you not have an idea of what services are available after they turn 3. So there are certain things that are required of this conference. It has to be held no later than 90 days prior to your child's 3rd birthday, but it can't be more than 9 months because we want it to be early enough that the school system has the information to start putting your child's IEP in place. And you're going to get some more information on that. And eligibility and their eligibility process, but we don't want it so early that the information that they're getting is not really accurate. So that 9 months to 90 days is kind of what the state has set for when we hold those transition conferences. The transition plan must include steps and services to support the transition from Part C, which is KEIS, Early Intervention System, to Part B, which is the public preschool. We're going to have discussions and trainings of parents regarding future placements and services. Now, some families may choose that you don't want your child to go to public preschool, and that is completely your right. As a parent, you have that choice. Public preschool is not mandatory, but it is something that could be available. And the transition conference is a place for you to learn about what's available in the public preschool for you and your family and whether or not that's something that you want to take advantage of. You also are going to get procedures to prepare your child for a change in services, including steps on how to adjust to those new services. So are there things that you as a family can do if your child is going to go to public preschool? What are some things that maybe you guys need to start working on to help them with that transition? Like maybe putting on their jackets because they're going to have to put their jacket on for themselves when they go to out for recess, or being able to walk in a line, things like that they may experience in school. There's just different things that we can discuss as a team on what would be helpful for your child for the transition process as well. And then they also want to confirm that the school system has a copy of all the information they need from us to be able to determine what more information they need to do to determine your child's eligibility for their program. So we're going to make sure that they have received a copy of your child's IFSP and evaluations and assessments and things like that. And then we're going to identify other services and activities needed to support the transition of the child. So if you may need, maybe the school doesn't provide a certain service that you may need more of a medical type of service, like at a medical clinic. We can help make those referrals to independent medical clinics as well. So we just try to put a complete plan in place of, what can we do to wrap around you to make sure that you are going to get everything that you need once you transition out of our program. Okay. Part B, preschool services. At the transition conference, we're going to discuss a description of what the eligibility for Part B for preschool is. They're going to give you a timeline of the process for when you consent for an evaluation and conducting eligibility determinations under Part B, and the availability of special education and related services. Excuse me. And then program options for the time period of the 3rd birthday through the remainder of the school year. So some children may be eligible. They might have that late spring, early summer birthday. So school may not be in session when your child turns 3. So what can we do to continue services for you and your family, even though school may not be in session? Hey, turning it back over to you guys.
Well, and of course, there's a train here at the office, so all kinds of background noise. So hopefully everything's not too loud coming through. But one of the things that I think is so important when we're looking at, the transition at age 3, is that the systems, although it's under the same federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right? It's an education law for children with disabilities. Part C, the Kentucky Early Intervention system, which Angie had just went over with us, it is the family focus, right? The individualized family service plan. When you look at and you go to what's considered Part B, which is the 3 through 21, unless they graduate sooner, this takes it to an individualized education program that the child will receive if they qualify. So just in the nature of how it's set up, we go from a family focus to an individualized child focus. Sometimes, that is very overwhelming for us, right? Especially as families. And we may, we love our KEYS providers and our services, but it may not be the same that you're able to get once that they turn 3. And again, one of the things that we've got to look at, the eligibility for the Part B services, which is 3 through 21, and that's actually delivered through the local public school district, or LEA, the local education agency. So there's very different definitions. And so a lot of times people, they expect their child to qualify if they qualified through KEYS. And so that may not be the case. So looking at what that qualification entails. So the definition of disability under the Part B is the child must show an adverse effect that impedes progress where educational performance is significantly and consistently below the level of similar age non-disabled peers. They also must meet the criteria in one or more of the disability categories, which I'll go over here in just a minute with you. And they must need specially designed instruction and related services. So you have to hit all 3 of those. And so sometimes that's why our children may not qualify through the school system. But one of the things that I want to really concentrate on here too is that, and where I see some barriers and when children don't qualify is they may not be being evaluated under the correct category. And again, one thing that I need to make sure that I mention, a diagnosis, when we're looking under Part B eligibility, a diagnosis is not equivalent, because that's a medical diagnosis, to a child qualifying in the eligibility for an IEP through school. So I just want to kind of cover that briefly there. So on the next slide here, we're going to kind of look at the eligibility categories. And so you may wonder, well, why in the world did you list 2 lists? Well, because it's important to know. So the federal law, right, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, that's the federal education law. Well, in Kentucky, we have Kentucky Administrative Regulations. There's categories in that as well. So I did want to share both of them because there's a couple of categories where Kentucky goes above and beyond. You look like the perfect example is the 4th one down. Under the federal definition, when it was reauthorized in 2004, emotional disturbance is the category. They removed the behavioral part. Under Kentucky Administrative Regulations, the category is emotional behavioral disability. And many of our children right now, and in past, would not qualify if that behavioral part was out of that category, right? So this is very crucial for a lot of our children, because there are a lot of behavioral needs that our children are experiencing. There's a whole lot of things, right now we're looking at our children and maybe some delays that they're experiencing. We're in post COVID, right? So there are a lot of things to take into account on where they currently are. Now, all of the categories except for one through the 3 through 21 you can qualify under, except for under the developmental delay category. That is for ages 3 or until they turn 9, right? And at that point, they will either test into a different category or test out of services. A lot of times what I see is children when they are transitioning from KEYS, Kentucky Early Intervention System, to like the preschool and the Part B, we concentrate on they're evaluated under developmental delay category. Well, they may not be eligible under that, but they may very well under another category. So please know that any of the other categories, if you feel, and we can always work with you at Kentucky Spin stepping through the process. If you're not sure, it's important when they do that evaluation that any of the categories that you feel that your child may qualify, we're looking at those areas. We're getting a comprehensive evaluation so that we see, because no, they may not qualify under developmental delay, but they may under the emotional behavioral disability. So always reach out to us and we can kind of explore that a little bit more. But we'll look here on the next slide, just as with the Kentucky Early Intervention System, the Part B, anyone can refer a child that has knowledge of the child, the parent, doctor, provider. What's going to be important, just like with the early intervention system, is before a child could be evaluated, there has to be the parental consent to evaluate signed. That gives them permission that they could do the evaluation. Once that's done, it's 60 school days from the date that was signed to have the evaluation completed by. So that's what the rule in Kentucky is. So one of the things that's going to be important to keep in mind, because you'll notice that time frame from that transition meeting, right? Is that allows the school system enough time to evaluate them. Sorry, I had to take a refreshment break there. So a lot of times what we'll hear is, okay, but and a lot of times this doesn't happen though when it's the transition from the Kentucky Early Intervention System into the school system. But keep in mind, you can request your child be evaluated at any age, right? The 3 through 21. But if the evaluation is denied, just so that you're aware of that, is the district must provide you a prior written notice, an explanation of why they have denied to evaluate your child. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why do you have this up here about child finds? Well, when you're provided the prior written notice, it's important to know that there is a child find responsibility for the public school district, but then also under KEYS, the Kentucky Early Intervention System, which is the birth through 3, which is the responsibility if you suspect that a child may have a disability, to have the evaluation done by. And so as part of your parental rights under the child find responsibility, that is one thing that we could work with you about getting that evaluation, especially because they don't have to have a prior diagnosis to be evaluated. And understand too, though, that when they're evaluated for a disability under Part B or Part C, is they're not being that doesn't mean that they're diagnosing the child, right? That's medical diagnosis, totally separate. We're seeing if they qualify under a disability category. On the next slide here, we'll kind of go over the evaluation. Now, say if your evaluation results come back and you're not in agreement. One of the things that is important to know with this initial evaluation, but any evaluations that occur after that, you do have the right to request an independent education evaluation, or IEE, at no cost to you. So that's just important to keep in mind. Now, so we went through, we provided consent. Now, what happens when it comes back and they're eligible? Well, there's several things. You can enroll them in the public school system, and they're receiving their education there. And you give consent for services, and you all write individualized education program, or IEP. You could also decide that you don't want them enrolled in the public school system. And I'll give an example of, for a lot of families, some of the preschools are only half day. That doesn't work with the family schedule. So they may have them in a private preschool, right? So if that's the case, or childcare, if that's the case, then there could be an option of a private school plan, right, from the public school district. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to get all the services you would in an IEP in the private school plan, but that's an option. You can also decide not to give consent to receive services. So those are your options that are available. Now, one of the things that I want to point out, and I should have said at the very beginning when I was starting this, is in Kentucky, not all children, hopefully one day we will get to where all children are entitled to attend preschool. But as you all know, that is not the case, right? There's different criteria to be eligible to attend the public preschool. Keep in mind, if a child is identified and eligible under Part B as a child with a disability and have an IEP, they are afforded the opportunity to receive free appropriate public education to go to preschool. And all those other criteria that might apply doesn't in determining if they can attend or not. So I hope that kind of makes some sense. So
Rhonda, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You do have a question. I didn't know if you saw that in the chat.
So that's a great question. So if a child with an emotional disability, the testing is separate from developmental delay testing in school. If so, how would I talk to someone about a child that has significant other issues but is not found eligible for developmental delay? So that is a perfect question. So say if there's, it sounds like testing's already taken place. So it may be that you need to request them to be evaluated under the certain category. So I'm assuming that maybe they've already been evaluated, not found eligible. Keep in mind that right to the independent education evaluation is not going to help if that, because that independent education evaluation is going to be looking at and testing for the area that they tested for through the school. So you may have to start back on the process of requesting and being very specific the categories that you want them evaluated under, that they possibly can qualify. Now, a lot of times, there's also another, I don't know if Eileen, we can skip back a few to the eligibility categories. I just want to point out here another category. And the reason I brought up and Ken pointed about emotional behavioral, a lot of our children right now are experiencing that emotional behavioral concerns. But there's also another category you'll see down there, the other health impaired category. That could be anything from ADD, ADHD, Tourette syndrome. A lot of disabilities could qualify under that. Now, It does not mean that every child with ADD, ADHD is going to qualify under that, right? And there is, if I did not, Amber, please help me remember because I don't know if it was on the resources page, but we'll send in the follow up email. I'm going to link you all to the eligibility. If it's not on your PowerPoint handout, I will link you all to the eligibility forms that are used within the state so you can see the areas that are looked at. And we'll also send some information and resources where you can read a little bit more on the different eligibility categories. But again, please reach out to us any questions that you might have as you're going through the process, because a lot of it is very overwhelming and everything is very individualized for each child. I think at this point, I hand it back over to Eileen, if I'm straight. Yeah, thank you.
Just little old me. So this is showing KDE, the Kentucky Department of Education, their guidance for IEP development. This is just a good representation to show how this works, because you're going to do the same thing every year when you are creating or making an IEP. Like every time your children you're gonna have to go through the meeting and have a discussion about what are the present levels for my child? What does my child currently look like in school, in their environment, in their educational setting? What does a typical day look like? Because I need that put into the IEP itself. Because if the school, or if we can't see where there's a concern or where there's an issue, it's really hard to get a support on the other side if we don't see that there's an issue to begin with. So just kind of briefly going through these, that you start off with every IEP has your present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. They should all have those special factors of consideration. Like we have a couple of different populations that we need to make sure that we are taking extra special care, that we're not missing things. Up next, we have our measurable annual goals. These goals are based on what are the strengths and the weaknesses that we see with that child based off of those present levels. And then from there, making goals, educational goals, to make sure that this child is able to academically be there with their peers, but also that they're functionally able to stay inside of the school and be able to be with their both disabled and non-disabled peers. Up next, we have our specially designed instruction. So that's something that is required, that we need to change how this child is being able to be taught so they can access education like their peers. The next step, we have our supplementary aids and services. So this is going to be, what are those different accommodations? What are those modifications? What are we doing or changing in our kids' day so that way they can stay inside of their classroom? They can stay in their educational setting. You know, is it sensory strategies? Is it calm down techniques? Is it, behavioral charts? Is it a scribe? Is it a reader? There's lots of different things, but I always like to think when I'm looking at it, this is the section that's going to show and tell other people what is in there to try and help my kid. What can they do? What are the different strategies? After that, we have accommodations. So what accommodations are needed? Like, do we need to do double time for testing? Or is there other accommodations that are needed for my child? After that, we have our program modifications and supports for the school personnel. So if your child uses something like an AAC device, and I'm going to hope Amber can type this in the chat, but the alternative augmentative communication device, sometimes it's like the iPad that sometimes kids have. My kid's therapist calls it like a talkie or a talker. Well, if we have some sort of assistive technology device, does the teacher know how to use it? Does the teacher know how to teach the child how to utilize it or to use it appropriately? Does that teacher or does people inside of your child's life need some sort of modifications or educational supports so that way your child is supported inside of their school? After that, we have participation in general education, which leads us into that least restrictive environment. All students have the right to start off in trying to be educated with their non-disabled peers as much as they possibly can. And that's our goal, is to keep kids inside that general education environment, and that we don't take them out unless that is what is needed for that child. Because some kids need a higher structure, or they need pull out time or pull in time. But it's important to remember, we were talking about the eligibility categories, just because your child maybe qualifies or is eligible underneath an autism diagnosis, that does not mean they go to the autism room. That just means that child has autism. What do they now need? We're going to be able to look at the IEP. What does that child need? And how does autism stop them from receiving their education? What supports are needed? And then from there, you go into extended school year services, and that's for children who have significant like regression or might need additional services over breaks like summer break, fall break, and things like that. And that is something that is determined by the ARC team, or the Admissions Release Committee team, which you are an equal member of. And then from there, it says ongoing progress monitoring, because what we did is we evaluated, we saw what was going on, we made a plan. Let's see how this plan is doing. Is your child making progress towards their educational goals? And if they are, awesome. Do we need to change the goal? If they're not, what are we missing? What is something we need to do? So if you do have a concern that this is something, you can say, hey, I'd like to have a meeting, because it is a continuous thing. It's not magic. It's not going to instantaneously fix it. But when we see that the plan isn't working, calling another meeting, so that way we can find something that will work. And so this is something that you do every year. Then I saw Rhonda hop off. I don't know if she wants to talk about this slide or the next one.
Well, I was just going to point out too, because many of our children may have multiple disabilities or multiple concerns. And so it's important to understand the disability categories so that they qualify, and there may be some helpful things or tools that have worked for other children to take in mind. But what's going to be very critical is the present levels individualized for them. And I know something that's very important too, say if you're a child, and in the chat it was pointed out, your child may have the receptive language delay, but they also have the behavioral concern. So they may qualify under the emotional behavioral disability category, but that does not mean for that receptive language delay, we're not also taking that into consideration. And how you do that is through your present levels. When you're going down through the different areas that we need to look at and cover, we make sure that that's given a true picture of where they currently are. So it's important to understand the disability categories, but the disability categories does not dictate their services and supports that they have. That's very important. And so really working with that to keep it in mind. So say that the very same child didn't qualify under the emotional behavioral, but they may have qualified under the other health impaired category, right? Well, one of the things, and like Eileen said, one of the considerations of special factors that we need to look at for every child in an IEP is, does their behavior impede their learning or that of others? If it does, there, along with the present levels, because your present levels and special factors are going to set the stage. If it's not identified there, it's not going to be addressed further in the IEP. So I just wanted to kind of point that out there. And we can also reach out to us, Alexis and different ones, reach out to us if there are some very specific questions. And part of our work that we do is work one-on-one with families stepping through the process. So we can kind of not just troubleshoot, but kind of go down maybe some suggestions or areas to look at. And that peer support can be very helpful. I just know my peer support with my peers here as I'm going through different things, it can kind of help out, and we all see things from different perspectives, right? So please reach out to us, and I'll hand it back over, Ali. Oh, but I did check something while you were talking. I did, and you may want to go to the next slide. I did I did include, like I meant to, it's not on this side, but on the next one, there is the link to Kentucky Department of Education eligibility form. So it is on your handout.
Perfect. Um, yeah, so these two slides, and I'm sure if you see inside of the chat that we have the PDF version. So these are all clickable links that you have available to you. I always say, look at this as tools to put inside your tool chest. And I don't think everyone's going to have time to look at them right now, but if you're like, oh, we talked about that, awesome. You have something to go back to. We're also going to have on here any way to contact us, whether it's you're interested in the Kentucky Early Intervention System or the new Vistas program, Child Care Aware, or the Help Me Grow Kentucky. These are all wonderful programs, just there to help kids. Just there to help kids and to try and make sure that parents are, empowered to advocate for their children and to know where to find those right resources. I also just want to say, looking at the question, I go, oh, a behavioral issue, amazing. So behavior's communication, period. It's a full sentence. And so it sounds like a communication issue that you could then request the school to look at. But that being said, that brings us to the end of our presentation. We'll stay on here for just a couple more minutes. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat now, and we can go over those or definitely get you connected to the right person. As with everything, follow us, contact us. Kentucky Spin is here for those one-on-one peer supports, working with other families who've kind of been through it. Also, if you see there on the left, if you can scan that QR code or click that link to go ahead and complete our evaluation, that evaluation code is also located inside of the chat. So we really take these seriously. We create what you all need and what you see as parents, as professionals. So if there's something that you really liked, if there's something you wish we got more into, if there's something you thought was terrible, awesome. Let us know, because that's how we are able to provide this for you all, is that you let us know what you need, and we're here to help try and fill that gap. You can also sign up for Kentucky Spin News and click through there. We have our wonderful e-newsletters for both transition age children, so kids crossing over into adulthood out of high school, along with our general e-newsletter for everyone. And I don't think I see anything else in the chat, but we really do appreciate that everyone has spent their lunch hour with us. We hope this was helpful and that you all received some information or hopefully answered some of those questions that you kind of came here looking to get those answers to. And again, please feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions. That is what we are all here for.